Everybody knows that the media is bad for society, right? Every day we're bombarded with negative images and messages that at a drop of the hat influence us all to live destructive lives. In the KCB102 Week 2 lecture, Stephen Harrington explained the media effects logic well by defining it as how the evils of the media are represented to us in pop culture. We see sex on television, so we all become sex addicts. We see skinny girls in magazines, so we all become anorexic. And when we see violence in video games, we all become bloodthirsty, rampaging, violent tyrants who run through the streets looking for people to run down with our cars, shoot with AK-47s, and then stab multiple times in the face. This logic of people seeing negative things in the media, focusing today on violence in video games, is, as Stephen so eloquently puts it, anchored firmly in the silver bullet and hypodermic needle concepts of media influence. This concept of the media having a constant negative effect on people is a particularly popular belief in regards to video games emulating violence in real life. In August of 2012, the Daily Telegraph published an article with the headline reading, "Violent Video Games Incite Kids to Crime." The article begins with the New South Wales Police Commissioner, Andrew Scipione, being directly quoted saying, "Knife crime is soaring among youngsters because brutal video games made violence seem acceptable." The lovely article concludes in saying that the damaging violence that youth are being exposed to in console games has led to a concerning and significant increase in knife violence. Now, in David Gauntlet's 10 Things Wrong with the Media Effects model, it is suggested that to explain violence in society, researchers need to start with the actual participants of the social violence, rather than starting with the media. Gauntlet suggests that the media effects approach looks at the problem backwards by starting with the media and then trying to lasso onto a social situation. To really explain violence in society, Gauntlet states that researchers need to identify the true identity, background, and character of those engaging in the violence instead of jumping to the media to blame first. A line from the Daily Telegraph article read, "Mr. Scipione's comments come after a spate of stabbings involving youths over the past month, which have seen teenagers killed, wounded, and arrested." The stabbing incident that this is referring to happened in 2012, July, in Sydney's King's Cross. What the article doesn't go into detail about is the explicit unstable mental health issues, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and family unit breakdown of the attacker. Instead, branding him as a young man who's desensitized by spending hours acting out deadly scenarios on his computer screen. In the 2011 article, "Video Games Are Not the Enemy," psychologist and researcher of the effects of video game violence, Christopher Ferguson, agrees that background knowledge of these participating in the violence need to be considered. Ferguson published a study in 2011 which found that mental health problems are the main predictor for negative outcomes, not video game violence. Contrary to media perception, according to Video Games and Wellbeing, a comprehensive review by Dr. Daniel Johnson, Dr. Laura Scholes, and Michelle Calder, moderate video game can actually contribute to positive emotions and emotional stability. In fact, non-gaming adolescent boys are put at a greater risk for problems including emotional disturbance, which can lead to violence. The review states that the research conducted does not support long-term direct effects of violent video games on self-reported physical aggression. And in regards to those supposed crime soaring rates among youngsters because of brutal video games, Christopher Ferguson, in Video Games Are Not the Enemy, found that although violent crimes in Australia are already low compared to the US and the UK, homicides have declined, as have armed robberies over recent years. As Stephen Harrington said in the KCB 102 Week 4 lecture, the myth that video games are all violent, all addictive, and all cause violence is in fact a myth. Studies have determined that despite popular belief throughout the media, playing violent video games does not emulate into real life. If media effects model logic of people seeing negative messages in the media and immediately reacting them in real life was true, then I personally would have a caravan in my backyard where I cook meth, and I would run around slicing every piece of fruit I could find with a giant samurai sword.